The audio grind.
Now then, everyone, welcome to the Audio Grind episode 2 with Tyler Joe Connett out in the Tuscan Hills.
Now then,
how we doing? You all right?
yeah, good. It's all right. It's hot again today. So,
Well, it will be, won't it?
well, I don't know. We've been storming for the past week, so it was a big ominous cloud in the distance, but it's still hot.
Oh, you poor soul.
I know. It's really hard life, mate.
So, yeah, I'm Francis Gill, and today we're going to be talking about the death of live drums on record. A nice little divisive topic to really wind the drummers up. So, yeah, with the developments and improvements in drum sample libraries in recent years, is recording live drums still the most effective and economically viable way of creating a drum track on your songs? Last week, we briefly touched on things like Easy Drummer that we were using sort of 10, 11, 12 years ago. That was like, for me, I guess that was the start of, drum sample libraries and the technology of the time starting to sort of come somewhere close to being able to, replicate the feel and sound of a live drum kit. So what do we think?
Well, I'm kind of on the fence about this. I have been for quite a while. I think it depends what level you're at, what tools you have available, and your timescale. It's like, in my personal situation, recording live drums would be only if it was a very big project with a very big budget.
Yeah.
Like there is no way I am going to go hire out a studio for a client. Absolutely not. I wouldn't unless their budget was like over $1,000 a track. Because
it needs to be at least that, yeah.
It'd be insane. I mean, yeah, I could, throw the mics up on the kit I've got out there. I could easily do that. But the back room there is not set for drums. It's the drum kit is a drum kit from the 90s. Yeah, it's a very well kept kit in very good condition, but it's not geared up for professional recording at all. I mean, I use it as a hybrid kit. It's my MIDI kit. But
are you using that to trigger them?
Yeah, it's got mesh heads on. So it's mesh heads with a brain, just a drum brain. It's completely DIY. Like, built the triggers myself and everything. But it's one of those things. Going back to the scope of the job, I am a very mediocre drummer. I can play in time. I can do a couple of fancy fills, and that's it. I would not be able to deliver something like, I don't know, like Matt Halpin could. Absolutely not even a shadow of a doubt. I could not do it. Like, it would be a waste of the client's money. So you're talking now, I'd have to go hire a professional drummer in. When in reality, I could go onto GGD's page, buy their Modern and Massive kit for what is it, 99 quid now?
Yeah, 100 quid.
And yeah, 100 quid. So you got access to 7 snares, 7 kick drums or whatever. You got 8 or 9 different kits in there or whatever.
Yeah.
So did you see like the balance? It's like, yeah, if you've got the budget and the space and the drummer, yeah, let's go for it. But I just don't, and it's just not worth it for a track that somebody's paying 200 quid for, 250 quid for. For me, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier on last week, we spoke about Easy Drummer. You've just mentioned their GGD Modern and Massive. I mean, I can't think of a better 100 quid spent.
No.
It's that good. I was that impressed with it from the off. I mean, like I guess like there was a couple of pieces of like software, like sample libraries, should I say, that were kind of involved in my progression towards like using GGD and stuff like that. Obviously, after Easy Drummer, we had things like Superior Drummer. I still think the NY Avatar kit on Superior Drummer stands up. There's some great snares on there. There's some fantastic snare drums on there, and the tom shells are brilliant on that kit as well. I always really like those. I messed around with Slate drums for a while as well. Little bit trashy. There were a few samples that I quite liked, and I mainly used those as sort of layers and things. But when GGD came along a few years ago now, I do think that really did kind of like raise the bar in terms of like drum sample quality and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about an absolutely fantastic engineer with an absolute fantastic drummer. You
Mm.
know, it was bound to happen. I mean, they're renowned for that drum sound. So
I mean,
it's
your big deal on GGD stuff as well is I think it's that room.
yeah,
It's that room sound is just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, like I don't use because I mean like Modern and Massive finds its way into the overwhelming majority of tracks that I'll produce.
yeah,
You know, if I've been kind of involved in the construction of the track, if it's not just a mix job, you know, if it's a full production job, it will generally be Modern and Massive that ends up on the tune. But I don't use any additional reverbs.
no,
I
because
just use I use compression and maybe some saturation on the room mics and treat them however I see fit, depending on the nature of the track that it is that I'm working on. It's that good.
yeah.
So
I mean, they've done a couple of different libraries. I mean, I bounce between a couple of them when I'm doing that to get specific sounds. I mean, we're taking a big part of this conversation out of the equation, which is obviously the drummer in the band, but eh, it's. I just think it's the best way to go for people like us, people who are working in home studios. I
yeah,
just don't see an alternative.
well, I mean the big thing that you've already kind of hit upon is the budget thing.
Yeah,
I've had clients, well, quite relatively recently, I would say, in the last sort of few months, that I've produced tracks for them where the kit has been sequenced, where we've been working with drum samples, and now they want to move towards using live drums. And I think a lot of the reason for that is because of almost the ceremony of recording live drums, and there's just this idea that just because the drums are live, that they're going to sound better for some reason.
yeah,
But they're not thinking of the bigger picture. They need the drummer, they need the kit, they need the mics, they need the room, they need all of these factors to, you know, align. And that's the only way that they would get, you know, anywhere near what you would call an improved drum sound. And the difference as well is, I guess now people are they're expecting pro results without a pro budget.
yeah,
Because like you've just said, you know, recording a kit, I mean, to properly record a kit, let's say you had all of the components. You had the great drummer, you had the great drum kit, you had the mics, you had the room, you know, and let's say you did have the budget. It still takes forever. I
yeah.
mean, you know,
Um,
providing you know your drummer is gonna, you know, knock it out in a couple of takes or whatever. But I mean, like realistically, just hiring a studio out, getting set up, the time that it takes to sort of like get your mic placement perfect before you even put your stick through a snare drum is like mega.
and just going back to mics and stuff, going into like GGD when I first got it, obviously I looked through it, like as much information as I could possibly find out about it to help me with processing.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the mics that were used just for the rooms, there was like nearly $8,000 just for one mic. And if
Wow.
you're, yeah, and if you're telling me that on a budget, I can go and get one of those mics for your kit, but no, a C414 will do just fine. Oh, sorry, a clone of a C414 will do just fine. It will not do just fine in its place. Like, there's a reason why, you know, it costs. Oh, what the fuck? Oh, I've lost my camera again.
It's happened again.
I know.
It's happening
Honestly,
again.
never buy a fucking GoPro ever. Never buy one.
Well, the thing we've learned from the first two episodes of making this podcast is, I
Never
mean,
buy a fucking GoPro. It's shit. I bought this brand fucking new like 2 years ago, and it's shit. Anyway, moving back on to what I was saying about drums. I've completely lost my train of fucking thought now. Thanks, GoPro, you fucking wankers. What was I saying?
you were saying about how like they were using like 8 grand microphones to capture the room sound for things like the latest like GGD stuff.
Yeah. So moving on from that, it's just not economical, is it, at all, to start, even to rent these mics out? I mean, it would have to be an extremely passionate project with an extremely big budget to be renting out a studio. And not being funny. If I'm renting out a good studio, I am renting out the engineer to that studio, even if I'm the producer and engineer myself, because
Yeah.
nobody is going to know that studio better than that engineer. And
Yeah,
I think you'd be
absolutely.
extremely foolish not to hire the engineer. So you got that. You're gonna have time for the drummer because let's be honest, the drummers are never prepared, and that's not dissing drummers. It's just like if
Careful.
you know, but it's like if you're going into a studio to record and you're not recording it in a drummer's home studio, there's a reason why you go into an external studio to record because they don't have the space to record it anywhere else, or the space isn't good enough. So they're going to need more time, to get used to the space and how it feels. And, they're probably going to be playing on a different kit. So, unless you've got the budget and you've got a lot more time to do these things, it's just not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had people as well, sort of using as part of their argument that is pro recording drums. Oh, I can really tell the difference. Sample drums sound really, really plastic. But these people that have said this, when they've sent me maybe MIDI lines that they've sequenced, you think, well, yeah, there's no wonder you think it sounds plastic because every velocity, like every hit is like 127 velocity. Yeah. And they've like quantized it. You know what I mean? Like it might not be as extreme as everything being absolutely rammed to the ceiling, but it's everything's quantized, and it's like, of course it sounds plastic, not every time a drummer hits a drum, they're not hitting it as hard as they physically can with every single hit. Why did you think this was going to sound organic? So I do think a lot of the time when people claim to be able to sort of tell the difference between real and sample drums, it's probably more often than not because they're not spending enough time sequencing the drums, and they're not getting to know their samples well enough. Because you can create really sort of convincing sequence drum lines now.
Yeah.
So I mean, in terms of like sequencing tips, I mean, I think your drum game is really, really strong. I mean, you must have some sort of tricks up your sleeve that you use for sequencing kit.
Well, how I would go about sequencing a kit is, it sounds really stupid, but I'd tap my table. And if I'm really struggling, especially with the hardest things to do, a 16th on a hi-hat and a rolling snare, they are really fucking difficult to get with with MIDI. So tap on your table, get a little mic like this and tap on your table. And then look at the waveforms and listen to the tonality of the hits if you're really struggling. And just kind of match the velocity or the samples of the drums to get these. I mean, there's a couple of humanization tricks you can do, and there's a trick which I want to get onto a bit later because it ties into something really cool that I've got into my head. But a lot of it is just thinking how a real drummer would hit it. Like no drummer hits at their absolute hardest. I mean, I'm talking in GGD terms here because this is how I use it. But the 127 hit is not a natural hit for a drummer. That is like an accent hit. A drummer would never hit that hard on a normal hit. So if you go to like the second one down where there's all the tone in the drums, because you start to lose tone, you just get attack at that sort of point. So
absolute punch, just front end.
Yeah. Which sounds great if you're doing an accent with a China, like, you know what I mean? It sounds fucking sick.
Yeah.
But if you're doing a beat in the verse, like, it's going to sound plastic and
totally
weird.
I mean, so I think one of the main uses for like the really, really hard hits on, especially sort of like relating to the GGD stuff, is like they're great for layers. If you need a little bit of front end, if you've got like maybe a different kit that you're using, and you just your kick or your snare is just missing that transient, missing that little bit of punch, you could just layer it with like the 127 hit. And it's really going to bring some nice front end out, providing you can sort of like blend the sample well enough. But I think that's a great bit of insight that you just said there about like tapping on your table.
Yeah,
because how many?
Sorry, it's the fucking delay. But it's about thinking like a drummer. I mean, to program drums, you kind of do have to have a little bit of base knowledge about how the kit works, because what I hear a lot as well is when I get guitarists and people like clients sending me drums, they'll have these crazy fills or they'll have impossible beats where they're hitting like 3 cymbals at a time. Yeah. And it's like, you've got 2 arms. Or they'll do like a they'll do like a pattern that would be physically impossible, like a flam straight into like a cymbal hit or a
Yeah.
hi-hat shot, and it's like no drummer would physically be able to get it that. Well, yeah, they'd be able to do it, but they wouldn't have the same power on the second hit. It just would be impossible.
Yeah, so it's about getting into the mindset of the drummer. I think like I don't do the table tapping thing like you do, but I mean that's maybe something I'll sort of like go and think about now. But like if I'm sequencing some kit, I will definitely kind of like think about where my limbs would be. I mean, I'm no drummer at all. I can probably think like a drummer. Maybe drummers would disagree with that and be like, "Dickhead is a guitarist. All does he think he is?" But but like, yeah, like I guess like I'm very considerate as to where I think my limbs would be. You know what I mean? Like if you're reaching for a left-sided crash, that puts me on my right hand. I need to be sort of like considerate as to where realistically I could get to next.
Yeah, you're not going to be doing ghost notes, straight after on your snare because you're not going to, or a snare roll like instantly after. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, totally. So I guess it's just a case of being kind of like getting into the mindset of the drummer really, and just sort of taking genuine steps towards like trying to sort of like create that human feel.
What I think we should do is I think we've pretty much bashed on the real drums. For the real drums for quite a while. I think we should actually start moving on to why it's pretty good because I think we've just fucking absolutely just ripped its arsehole open. So we should probably start going back on that. Stroking that ego again.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, like we're not. I guess we're not having this conversation to try and be divisive. It's not that like we are anti-real drums. I guess sample drums do typically make our lives easier most of the time, but it's just an interesting conversation because I mean, like I think you mentioned something the other day about the purism.
Yeah,
there is like a sort of stigma still about using sample drums, whether that be for layers or sequenced from fresh. The purists still kind of want to use live drums. Tell me why.
Well, like I'm going to go back to what you said about purism, and we did speak about this the other day because we was talking about some albums, but my university paper was on a completely different subject, but it's a similar sort of vein about purism. About mine was like hardware versus software, even though it kind of lines up with this. But I ended up doing an experiment where I had like blind test of hardware versus software, and people couldn't tell. And I gave them 2 samples to listen to. People that were really like knew the software quite well, and people who didn't know the software, and people who just weren't musicians. So there's like 3 groups of people, and the people that really knew what the subject was about were really like into the subject. I'd find that most of these people, barring 1 or 2, would get the answer wrong as to what it was, and then they would go on to list reasons why they was right, even though they was wrong. So it was like, oh yeah, this one is the hardware because of this particular sound only comes from hardware, because it did this glitch here, and it was complete wrong. They got the answer completely wrong, like not even in the ballpark. And when I actually told them they were wrong, they proceeded to argue with me about how it's like, no, it cannot be. I must have been right because it did this. I mean, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm just trying to say in specific conditions. I mean, most people, going back to the albums thing, most people don't know that a lot of the earlier Linkin Park albums were completely fake drums, and nobody ever mentions it. I mean, what was another example you told me earlier, which I forgot? Which one was it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few that I've found out about recently. I mean, maybe having done just a little bit of research before we sort of spoke about this today. But yeah, Marilyn Manson apparently hasn't had any live drums since 1996. So that'll take us back to sort of Antichrist Superstar sort of time. But I mean, that's what, God, how long ago is that? 20, I'm really bad at maths. 26 years ago.
Yeah, whatever.
So he's not used live drums for 26 years. Another one as well I found out about, Tesseracts. Like they've got some great drum sounds, like on their first sort of 4 albums. And I found out that they're all samples as well. which I mean, like, you know, it doesn't come as a surprise at all.
No. Well,
I think that. So go on.
Was it the new Spirit Box album that was done with? Was it Spirit Box that was done with EZ drummer? I think.
I
Or
mean,
was it done
sorry,
with
there's one thing that I'm going to pull you up on here that really, really makes me laugh. That you call it EZ drummer.
Sorry, it's Superior drummer, isn't it?
No, it's Easy drummer. Who the fuck calls it EZ drummer? It's supposed to be Yeah, I know it's an E and a Z, but it's obviously supposed to be easy because it's easy drummer. And it just really fucking makes me laugh when you're like, EZ drummer.
But I hate it. I hate acronyms. I hate it like that. It makes me feel stupid. So I'm calling it EZ drummer because that's how it reads.
You stick to your guns, mate. You call it EZ drummer all you want.
I'm gonna.
I've never heard anybody call it that, but yeah, fine. But who's using Easy drummer these days? Or EZ drummer?
No, well, it was Superior drummer now, isn't it? I don't think EZ drummer 2 was like. I'm saying it again. EZ drummer 2 came out like fucking 10 years ago or whatever. But,
it was way longer than that, dude.
Oh, whatever. Well, I know.
Sorry, go on.
What version are we on now? Is it like Superior Drummer 10 or some shit? Or
no,
is it...
it's Superior Drummer 3.
Fucking hell.
I've not dabbled with it. I've not dabbled with Superior Drummer 3. But sorry, I know we're kind of going off on a little tangent again, but do you remember Drum Kit from Hell?
Yeah.
Has that died a death yet? Because like everybody... Well, I mean, like, if you were like a metal band, in I don't know, 2006 to 2011, it was like Drum Kit from Hell. Everybody was using Drum Kit from Hell, and it was like just the same drum sounds on every album.
The problem with Drum Kit from Hell is it sounded amazing on its own, and as soon as you put it into a mix, it was shit. It didn't work because there was too much processing on the overall kit. So you just could not get it into a mix with other drum. Like sorry, we're going off on a tangent. I don't even give a shit. But it was like, with new drum samples, you can put them into a mix into your kind of like your way. Like you can process them different. With EZ drummer, no matter what you did to that fucking kit, it was sounding like EZ drummer. There was just no way. Drum Kit from Hell. There was just no way. So
yeah, it was strange that. But yeah, anyway, to get back to what we were sort of saying, you were saying about Spirit Box. Basically, I think that the point is that like there's a lot of albums. Artist albums, whatever, that are using sample drums, whether that be as layers, or whether that be just literally just, drum replacement or even sequenced drums. I think it would really surprise people how common it is. And also as well, why is it sort of accepted in some genres and not so much in others? Because I mean, I guess this is a genre-specific thing. I think you would pretty much say now, if you were making a rock or a metal album, there's going to be drum samples involved. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with everybody uses one shots now for everything, even if real kit, fake kit. I mean, people use one shots on top of fake kits now, which is cool. But going back to the genre thing, I mean, it's look at bands like Pendulum. I mean, they've got like KJ is an absolutely unbelievable drummer, but most of their drums will be programmed, or like he will go in and play specific parts or breaks, and it will be quantized and looped within an inch of its life, because that's just the particular genre of music. But yet nobody goes up in arms at it. It's completely fine for them to do so. I mean, especially going into like modern metal production now, which is pretty much just EDM with guitars, which it is. I mean, drums don't sound like modern metal now. Like a real drum kit does not sound like that. So,
absolutely. I was listening to a friend of mine was playing me this sort of like technical death metal band that he's listening to at the minute the other day. I can't remember what they're called. They've all got like real horrible names, aren't they? But there was these like, really, really sort of fast, unbelievably tight, quantized kick drum patterns. And there was just no dynamics between what you would sort of perceive as the left kick and the right kick whatsoever. And we're sort of talking about the production of it and stuff like that. And I was like, well, this is probably never seen a real drummer in its life. And he was like, really? Do you think so? I was like, well, yeah, like probably not. Like, that doesn't sound like a drummer. That just sounds like a machine. Yeah. So I guess there are pros and cons of it, but I just think now it's an accepted sound. So let's round things up. Is it still worth tracking live drums? Hit me. Pros and cons.
Right. Since we've literally dunked on live drums this entire episode, I mean,
we said we were going to stop doing that. We said we were going to start listing some pros, and then I think we just carried on chatting about how much we fucking love drum samples again.
Yeah, we're just like, oh, we're going to stop bullying you now, but fuck you.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, pros for live drums is obviously drummer feel is great. I mean, I know there's other ways to capture drum feel with MIDI, like using Ableton grooves or whatever, but it's never going to beat a real drummer in a studio. You're just never going to beat it. The overall drum sound, if like obviously conditions are great, if you've got the room, the drummer, and everything, you cannot beat it. It's absolutely unbeatable. It's going to sound a lot better than samples. And plus, just the cymbals and tops in general, like it's just better than sampled. It really is. Like rolls, cymbals, all this kind of thing. It just sounds great. And the last thing, which is a pro, is the drummer of the band is genuinely happier because they're not like, oh, I didn't play my instrument. You know, it's that kind of argument.
Yeah, it's an interesting point actually. I hadn't really sort of thought about that too much coming into this conversation, but I guess like it's a funny one for drummers because they do. You know, they will feel kind of not as involved.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're supposed to be doing pros and cons here, but there is ways you can kind of get a bit involved with programming. Like I said, you know, single mic in a room to capture like a guide track for the track for the MIDI programming. You can use Ableton grooves, you can use all this kind of stuff, but still, they're still going to feel cheated out of the song because it's not going to be them hitting
it's not their physical recording.
No.
It's not the sound of what was happening at that moment in time in that space. It's not the physical recording. So I understand that to an extent. And yeah, I've done that several times. I've had drummers recording in the room next door. It is not a good room at all. It's like it's a terrible sounding room. And I've just hung up a couple of mics and essentially kind of like just gone in and painted the drum line. Over, you know, what they're kind of playing. Obviously, you know, another advantage of MIDI is that, you know, it's super manipulatable, it's super editable. So, you know, if you do need, you know, something to be a little bit tighter, if they are a little early or a little late on a snare, that's just so, you know, so easy to change. You know, editing a live drum kit, if there's a couple of things that need, you know, sort of like snapping in time slightly, is a bastard.
Yeah.
You know, just because of things like mic bleed, you know.
And I mean, even then, like, there's not a good enough warp algorithm. Yeah, you can do it on Ableton, you can do it on Pro Tools and all this, but it fucks your transient. It does fuck your transient, and you end up when you start warping aggressively, you've got to replace your hits anyway. You've just got to do it.
So you've hit me with some pros. I think we've probably listed enough cons of live drums.
We haven't listed enough cons.
We could go on all day. We could be here literally all day talking about the cons of recording live drums. And like I said earlier on, this may seem like we're kind of like bashing the drummers. We're bashing the kind of ceremony of recording live kit. That's not what I'm trying to do. Certainly, I don't think that's what you're trying to do. It's my belief that recording live drums is still the best way to go if you have the budget. And the budget, for me, is the key determining factor. To have fantastic sounding live drums on your record, first and foremost, you need access to a really good drummer, playing really good drums, recorded in a really good room with really good mics. And the budget comes into that, obviously, because every part of that is going to cost you money, including, you know, even the renting out of the studio, the use of the engineer. For me, if any part of that chain, if any of those components are missing, you might as well have sequenced your drums. Yeah,
I completely agreed.
That's kind of the way I see it. If you've got the great kit, the great mics, the great room, the budget, but you haven't got the drummer, you might as well have sequenced your drums. If you haven't got the kit, you might as well sequence your drums. If you haven't got access to the technology that is going to give you the quality recording, you might as well have sequenced your drums. And I don't see that there should be like, I don't think there is as much of a stigma about using sample drums as you know, perhaps there once was. I think more and more people are coming to terms with it, accepting it and getting on board with it. But amongst the purists, there still kind of is. I mean, there's still genres as well where you would be surprising to hear sample drums. Let's say, for example, if it was like a really, really nuanced, detailed kind of like dynamic jazz drumming performance, you would probably want, well, you would definitely want a live drum, you know, so in that situation. Also, as well, you know, when you see these insane sort of like shredding drummers on Instagram, like, you know, you could never sequence a part to sound like it had the vibe and ferocity of like a Thomas Lang.
No,
you know, if you had to sort of like, you know, program a drum part to be that detailed, that nuanced, you know, and that well, you know, to replace something like that, my God, like, you know, you would seriously have your work cut out. So there's still situations where you have to use live drums, but for the majority of the time, I would still recommend to my clients that, you know, don't always have an enormous budget. Sometimes it's like, you know, we've got £4.61, but we want to record live kit. It's like, yeah, in your fucking dreams, mate. You know.
I think that's what it goes down to, though, isn't it? It's not about dunking on live drums. It's about, look at the kind of work we do and our client base. Like, we are producers and mix engineers that work from a home studio. Like, some bands go to a studio to work, like, in that situation, which has its own pitfalls, because obviously, unless everybody in the band's a producer, you're expecting an engineer at a studio to be a producer as well, which is not their job. So, but anyway, that's another conversation for another time. But
that's maybe one for a different day. So I want to hear from drummers. I want to know what drummers think about this. You know, are you offended by the topic? Do you have something to say about it, or are you a little bit more kind of willing to embrace drum samples, maybe work with drum samples? Talk to us. Let us know what you think. You know, not even just drummers, people in bands. I'm sure it's been like a sort of topic for many bands that are going into sort of a recording situation, and, you know, maybe most of the band know that it's going to be cheaper, it's going to be more, well, you know, more cost effective, it's going to be more, it's going to be quicker to use sample drums that were maybe sort of sequenced in or sequenced along a sort of rough guide track that the drummers provided. But the drummer is kind of out there going, well, no, I really want to be on the record. I want my physical recording to be in there. That can be something that is a bone of contention. I've seen that in the past. So talk to us. Let us know your experiences, your thoughts. Have you got anything further to add, dude?
absolutely not, apart from, you know, just take it, basically. Start to embrace it, because you're going to get left behind, old man.
So yeah, we'd like to apologize to drummers worldwide for that. So we'll see you next time.
Do you honor your grind?